Welcome back to another ground up SCX24 build. And today is going to be a pretty special build. We are jumping into a lot of parts I've been collecting for a while, and the first of which is in the box here. We're going to start cheating today. This is the titanium rail Mazz Designs cheat code chassis kit. So I figured with this high-end chassis kit, I needed to pair it with some very high-end parts. So the first of which, and new to me, is this RS100 Micro Servo from NSDRC. So I would say this is probably at the top tier of micro servos. And to power that to its potential, I picked up their 8.4 BEC, and I got a little micro servo horn as well in aluminum. And then to round out that front end, we've got the brass best servo mount ever from Mofo RC. So let's just take a quick look at the electronics. We're going to go Lizard Pro with the 4-channel micro receiver for the FlySky GT5. And of course we're going to need a bearing kit. And then another new product I picked up was this Super 8 axle kit from Little Guy Racing. Got a few little extras to go along with that. Picked up some Dubro brass knuckles with the gray finish to pair with this gray plastic. I thought that would work well. Of course, we've got some worm gears, we've got some axles. I've got this Shapeways link riser, may or may not go on depending on the link setup, which is going to be these RC Steve 710 links. So these are high clearance, these are custom stretched, and of course they're Super 8 steering links on the front. So he's got these labeled because of the unique bends. So that's super nice. And then we've got the hot racing corner here with some hardware. Got the overdrive transmission, I believe that's around the 15%. And then I'm trying these new oil-filled long travel shocks from Hot Racing. And then of course, to round out the Mazz Designs, I had to get some wheels. So these are the double stars and raw finish. And then I've got some Endura tires here. I'm not going to get into those because the tires may change depending on the setup and the width. Once we get this built and set this cliffhanger body on there, just kind of see what kind of tire height we want. But that's kind of the quick overview, so I think we'll jump right in. Okay, let's take a quick look at this axle kit. So everything you see in plastic is what comes with this axle kit, and you get the inner axle shafts that you see here. So I ordered the brass front and rear diff covers extra, and the hardware comes with it, and it's labeled, which is great. Most of the time you just get a bag of hardware, so you know exactly what links go where. And then the other item I ordered extra was the CVDs. So if you do not order the CVDs, you'd have to provide your own outer dog bones as well. So we're going to replace those plastic knuckles with these Dubro gray brass knuckles, and these are off of Amazon. I think that's the only place I've seen the Dubro. And then the front plastic links will get replaced with these, looks like the two here on the left hand side are the steering links. So we'll get those assembled. Of course, I've got my worm gears, no overdrive there since we're going to do it in the transmission. And then my link risers, you can see I've got the stock one out, and then that Shapeways link riser with all the options. So because this cheat code chassis provides you chassis link riser options, we may not use that. I may save it for another build, but we're just going to see when we get everything hung on the chassis. But for now, let's get these axles assembled. Alright, I'm back with the front axle almost complete, and I was going to look for some hardware to install these front links since the kit doesn't come with any. So I dumped out the contents of the links, and to my surprise I found hardware and I found a buku of stickers. Look at this. Really cool. So big thanks to RC Steve 710. Nice loot package, and then you can see these are the Z-links. Pick one of these up. You can see they're bent in two directions. and they're labeled. And I noticed there's no O-rings on these, which is nice. It gives them a lot of movement, which you want. And then the steering links actually have an O-ring only on one side to actually tighten those up, which is what you want as well. So I was looking for this super long screw that's going to have to go through both of these at the mount, at the knuckle. So let me get those installed, and then we'll take a kind of a quick look at the assembled axles. All right, we got both axles assembled, and a couple notes on both of them. I took out one O-ring on the worm gear, and that got me nice and free spinning. It seemed like they were too tight with both O-rings. You can see I added, of course, brass hexes, pins, and lock nuts. And with these brass hexes, again, on these axles, I think I'm going to have to shave off some of this back spacing to the bearing, because I'm assuming on the front it's going to, when I tighten the wheels down all the way, it's going to bind. This one is very close. You can see there's a little bit of nub of the axle past the thread, but it looks like we're already seating on the bearing. The kit only came with 2 bearing retainer little flathead screws, so I had a bunch of them from +4 axle kits. So I added 1 to each side, so there's 2. So the back was pretty easy. The front was easy and smooth as well, no problems. The only thing I'm seeing is with this servo tray, there's a little wiggle on these 2 little mounting ears. The holes, I guess, are a little bit oversized. And I don't like that there's not like the full ridge over the top. You just have these little kind of ears. So to me, that's the weak point, if anything, with that servo mount. So that might be a reason to get the billet axle housings when they're released, just for that. We'll see, but I did replace these 2 screws with the black ones that were a little longer. But even tightening down all the way, there's still just a little wiggle forward and backwards because of those holes. So I may see what I can do to potentially shim that. I'm not sure. You can see I've got a stock deadbolt here. So let's take a look at the difference. So this is a true +8 per side. So you're getting a +16 track width increase overall. So that's a comparison right there to stock. One nice thing that's different on this Super 8, you can see this bearing retainer screw hole basically continues as a rib, and you get this full kind of reinforcement rib on the bottom. You get a little bit of one here for bracing, but that's nice. They kind of thought about reinforcing that back axle. So kind of neat. Different diff covers mounting on this side. It's kind of unique. Gives you kind of a nice flush back face or front face, I guess. But that's it for the axles. So I think now you know what we're going to do. We're going to open up that Mazz Designs box and see what that cheat code chassis is all about. Here we are with the chassis components laid out, and it's fairly straightforward. You've got your 2 rails, you've got your center skid, your 2 side trays, an ESC or battery tray, and then you've got a front and rear magnet mount, and then you've got an optional flat, I guess, front mount versus the one on risers. You get 6 magnets, so that gives you 4 and then 2, and then you've got your micro nuts. So you will need to provide your own hardware. So a new pack here, and then I've got multiple sizes here, the spares. And then I did notice a couple of these holes were not run all the way through. I don't know if you can see that, the bottom row for sure. So I recommend having a pin vise on hand or an X-Acto to kind of chase those through, check those before you get started. But I'm not going to get too much into the actual assembly of this chassis. You can go to Mazz Designs YouTube channel. He just released a really thorough overview of the way he assembles the chassis and his kind of step-by-step process. He goes through the links of screws you're going to need, his initial kind of setup as far as links and shocks. So it's very straightforward, so I'm not going to repeat that here. I suggest go to his channel, check that out, and so we'll come back. I should have this chassis assembled with links hung, and then we'll go from there. All right, here we are with the completed cheat code chassis assembly, and I tell you, that went together super smooth. Definitely check out the Mazz Designs tutorial on YouTube. Definitely made it super easy. So for the keen eye, you'll notice something here in the middle is missing. So I have yet to mention a motor. That's because I've been debating what I was going to put in this. So you can see here, I've got 3 motors. So I really had it narrowed down to 2. I was initially leaning towards one of these BAM motors, the 1900 kV with the 18-tooth pinion. And this is the 4100 kV with the 18-tooth pinion. These are originals right when they came out, so they have the plastic mounts. And then back here I've got a V2 Nano Beast with plastic, and then I went ahead and picked up an Albin's aluminum mount. So those are both forward-facing mounts. I guess all of these would be, unless I flip the transmission. So now with all of these out and kind of looking at them and comparing them side by side, I just really didn't realize how much larger and heavier these BAM motors were than the Nano Beast. So you can see I've got the SCX24 scales, so let's get them on the scales and see how heavy these guys actually are. Okay, you can see clearly how much smaller that Nano Beast is. And now you're going to be able to see how much lighter it is. So almost 13 grams lighter. So I think that's going to make my decision because of this chassis. This whole build is pretty lightweight, plastic axles, just not a lot of low weight. So I want to keep the CG low. And I think if I put this big heavy motor up in the air with that forward mount, that may throw me off a little. So I think I'm going to stick with the tried and true Nano Beast 2.0, and I'll use the lightweight Albin's mount. So that'll give me a pretty lightweight setup, and I'll just save these BAM motors for builds that are going to be a little heavier down low with maybe brass axles, just more weight to counter that motor weight. So I think now that I've got the motor picked out, it's time to mesh it up to the transmission and maybe test it. All right, we're back. Got the Nano Beast meshed up and installed, and I actually had to go swap out this Nano Beast. This is a different one, and you can see here it's got a gray steel pinion on it. So the issue with the original Nano Beast I had was if you turned it by hand, it was really chunky. Like you can feel it kind of click between magnets, but it's not that extreme. But mine was really chunky, and then when I tested it, there was a point where the can just kind of hung up and wouldn't spin at low end, and then high end was fine and smooth. It was just the low end, a lot of vibration. And so I called Nick over at Mofo RC, swung out there and swapped it out for this one. And if you're familiar with Mofo RC, he has some ZFG Nano Beasts, which are 0 frigs given. So he typically culls these out pretty well. And the one I had was kind of close by feel, so it was kind of hard for him to call out, but we swapped out a new one. So this one, I've tested it prior, works great, but we're gonna go ahead and turn it on and test it. So you definitely wanna get it installed to test it, since these wires are fairly delicate. You know, don't hold the can, don't hold the gears, and let's turn this thing on. See if I can get my finger good here, good acceleration here. That's that slow low end, nice and smooth. Nice, super smooth. And I have not gone and adjusted any settings on the FuryTech app, so that's just stock, how it is. So I will go in there and tweak those further later on, but I think for now we're going to move on. Okay, we've got the motor transmission assembly bolted up to the chassis. I've got the front and rear drive shafts attached to it, so we are ready to move on. And you can see here I've got these new Hot Racing oil emulsion long travel shocks out. And let's take a look at these. They look just like the normal long travel shocks, except for one big difference. This bottom spring retainer is new, as well as you see this bottom ball socket has no O-rings on it. The top does, per usual, so that looks all standard. And then it's got your adjusting collar for your spring as typical. So I've been wondering why they put this little spring retainer on the bottom. It made that different from any other shock. And I think I figured that out. So you can see here, I've only got 3 out because I've started pulling one apart. So this spring retainer is actually slotted, so you can actually just pull that to the side and it comes off. So I believe why they did this was to allow you to remove the spring without taking the cap off of your oil-filled shock. So once you've got these filled, bled, and they're working well, you can easily swap the spring rate after the fact by pulling off that retainer. So you don't have to, as usual, like most oil filled, you've got to pull the cap off, take the retainer, pull off the spring, and then re-bleed them or add oil or whatever. It gets messy. So I think they've kind of solved that here and made a quick change for springs. So that's kind of neat. And of course, we've got the black soft, we've got the gold medium, and they come with the silver firmest installed. So I'm gonna go ahead and get some 30 weight oil in these and bleed them out and figure out what spring rates I'm gonna get on there. And of course, I can change those easily later. But we'll get these assembled as a set here, and then we'll have, I think, every component ready to go ahead and bolt everything up to the chassis. All right, here we are with all 4 shocks filled with oil, assembled, and I went ahead and started with the medium spring rate. So I'll give you a little demo of the 30 weight. So nice slow, smooth rebound. And one thing I forgot to mention in filling these, I noticed the inner cap, rather than an O-ring to seal it, actually has like a rubber bladder. And I'll show a little photo of that, but that's pretty unique to these shocks as well, as far as what I've seen. So if you want to change the spring rates after you've filled it with oil, it's just this easy. You just bring it up to the shaft, flip it around, and there you go, ready to put on a new spring without messing with your oil. So now that we've got those ready, I think we're going to hang the axles and get the shocks on there. But first, I'm going to figure out a shim for this servo tray to get it to fit a little tighter on these little ears here that have kind of a larger hole. I was getting that front to back wiggle with the tray, so we'll see about shimming that up, and then we'll get this assembled. Problem solved. The shim is in. I used some 3M double side, and you can see that little strip of gray there under the servo tray on top of the diff. That was just enough to get it all cinched tight so I don't have any more wiggle. So we're going to get these on now. Boom! And here we are. We've got the completed assembled chassis. Got the nice oil-filled motion here. No binding, smooth side to side. And you can see I went to the very top, I guess, inward hole on both of these for the lean. And then because of these Super 8s, you can see I've got a little spacer. I use some of these plastic washer spacers. So I use those to get the shock head off of the frame so there's no scraping, but there's still quite a bit of an angle. So Super 8s may be a challenge to use, like telescoping shocks. They might want to bind. You'd have to really get your O-rings loose, and you might have to space more off of the frame to get these a little more parallel to the frame. And then you can see the fronts as well. They kick out at the bottom because these Super 8s. Looks like servo clearance is all good. won't know about tires until we get them on there to see what's going to clear these sliders. But looking pretty good so far, pretty happy with it. Got these links all connected. They were kind of a bear on the back until I figured out I needed to shorten my drive shaft. So initially I had a deadbolt rear drive shaft in there, and I swapped that to a Jeep C10 rear drive shaft. So you can see I've got a little bit of exposure there on that end one, but not too much, and that's my maximum droop, so I'm fine. And then the front is a Jeep C10 front as well, so didn't have to cut a drive shaft or do anything special, just had to get the right ones in there. So that's all looking good. The only negative I see is the up travel gets stopped by that tray. So you can see I'm almost there. I mean, it's super close, but you can see I'm hitting the drive shaft on that rear cross tray. And I'm kind of surprised Mazz didn't arc that bottom. That's kind of a known issue on the chassis, and this is the version 1 mofo, kind of same deal, the cross piece, electronics tray. So it's the same, it's square, but then he's actually evolved it to this new design that has the arc, you know, no matter which way you put it. So that arc allows for that drive shaft a little more up travel, and that looks like exactly what I would need to get full up travel on these shocks. I can still go higher. I'm not anywhere near hitting that axle. I can still get full side to side, but I just can't get both of them right up the middle. So I could Dremel out this really nice printed tray and give me a little more clearance, or I can just live with it. So the cost of this, I don't know if I want to Dremel into this. I don't know. I may talk to Mazz about that tray, a little tweak on that design, I don't know. But overall, I'm 100% happy with this kit. So not a lot left, but you can see the challenge lies ahead. It's going to be fitting in the electronics, which are pretty tiny. This 8.4 volt BEC, and then the battery. So got a stock battery here just for reference, and then I've got my smallest 3S here, this E-Flight. I think this is it's 300. So either one of these seemed huge for this layout. Even this one on the side tray is like the whole bulk, maybe even too much of that side tray. And then of course here's a stock battery, just massive. I don't know, you know, it's really not set up for this. I guess you could squeeze it right there and strap it in if you've got your motor forward, but being that I want to run 3S with this 8.4 volt BEC, I've ordered up a little tiny battery, so that is on the way. So hopefully that's going to fit somewhere in here. So I think this is going to probably conclude this part 1 until I get that battery in and can really assess the electronics layout, and of course got to get the cliffhanger body painted. So that's another big step, getting that painted, trimmed, get the electronics in, then we can figure out the wheels and tires on this thing. So that's going to do it for this first part. So as always, thanks for coming along. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you learned something. Hopefully this will help you if you're jumping into a cheat code chassis build. And like I say, Mazz Designs YouTube channel has a great overview on just assembly of the chassis itself. So definitely check that out. But until next time, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for part 2, and we'll see you soon.